Welcome back to Echoes and Edges, the Broken and Beautiful podcast. I'm so glad you're here. I'm Patria, the host for Echoes and Edges and the founder of the Broken and Beautiful Collective. We are a group of people on the hunt for beauty, meaning, and transformation, and I hope that this offers a little bit of that into your world. In part one of my conversation with Sher, we explored the ways shame, loneliness, and survival adaptations can shape our lives, often without our awareness at all. Today, we're picking up right where we left off. One of the most beautiful things about healing is that it isn't simply about learning new information. Most of us already know things we wish we could believe about ourselves. We know we're loved. We know we're worthy. We know we're allowed to take up space. And yet knowing something intellectually isn't always enough to change the way we experience ourselves. In this part of the conversation, Sher shares how compassionate presence, attunement, and story work began creating entirely new experiences inside her nervous system. We talk about shame, worthiness, self-compassion, and the surprising ways that our brains begin to heal when we receive care in the very places we expect rejection. Let's jump back into the conversation. It's not about what happened. It's about what is still happening. That's the wound. It's the thing that's still happening inside of us, that belief about who we are or lack of identity. So if you have additional thoughts about what it looked like for you to begin that courageous, hope-filled, turn toward your story instead of away from it. How did you do that? What was it accidental? What happened?
I don't think anything for me was accidental because I'm so intentional about everything. But I think when I experienced that kind of compassion, and we'll just keep talking about that in that first story group, which, then I experienced that. I have experienced that many times since. Yeah. But experiencing that from another opened, and it took time for sure, but it opened the possibility of me seeing myself differently. And so when we only see ourselves through the eyes of our suffering or our shame, we are just trying to survive life. And we, at least for me, and I think this is true, we are so hungry for love that we just don't want to keep messing it up. But we kind of keep messing it up because that's all we know to do, right? We're stuck in our patterns. We're struggling with our areas of deep suffering, like shame and insecurity. For me, shame, insecurity, and loneliness. And of course, that kept showing up in my relationships and in my life. And when it would show up, or to keep it from showing up, I had to have a pretty heavy hand with myself. And I had a very loud inner critic who was not very nice to me. and so I had a lot of thoughts that went through my mind about, don't be so stupid, or that was, that was ridiculous, or but constantly beating myself up. So when in the context of that story, I was offered such compassion and not just, oh, you poor thing, but words of power and strength of, share. This is what I hear when I hear your story. This is what I imagine when I hear the details of your story. And I was kind of blown away. And I was defending. I sat there and defended, oh, no, you don't understand. That person didn't have any power, or that person got out of control, but they didn't really mean to, right? So I always felt like, if something bad happened to me, it was my fault because I did something that caused and that I caused the pain or the consequence. And so when I sat with these women and they said, and they reminded me, you were a child. you were a child and you needed help. And I can just remember the feeling of, wait, what? Just what? What are you saying? And that story was reframed. And it was the beginning of me being able to hold to feel compassion for myself. It was the beginning of me being able to say to that inner critic, everything you say isn't true, to my inner critic, because now I have other voices of kind people who are saying something else. Yeah.
And there was something about what they were saying that was drawing your attention away from what the inner critic was saying, right? Because the inner critic was just the only way to help yourself through until there, it's that posture of like ear to the, wait, what did you just say? Right. And the surprise in a moment like that.
Yeah.
And you talk too about, and you said earlier, just a little bit ago, about actively seeking help to, mentorship and therapy at 30. But I hear you describing that even that posture of seeking help was to fix you. It was to make you good. And there was something about this moment that shifted, it turned it all upside down and inside out, where you could actually see things right-sidedly, even just a fraction, right? It's like turning the shirt inside out, like, oh, wait. Like it functions, but it gave you a sense of, oh, that actually fits better. And there's something about story work or just not even just a good friend, someone that can sit in this kind of place with you that can hold it and say, this is, like you just said, this is what I see. This is what I imagine. That is convincing enough to bring us to a different place.
It's like when we read, I like to read a good novel, a really good novel, when I'm surprised. There are twists and turns, and when that happens and I'm surprised, like I just love it. And it's like, oh, I didn't see that coming. And I didn't see this coming. I didn't see it coming. And what happened was I encountered love. And love, you and I talk about, love is the most powerful force on the face of the earth. And love in that moment began to redefine. And I want to say one thing about the inner critic, because I think probably most people struggle with that at points or in huge ways. And I want to say that,
especially, I think, but yeah.
Yeah. I now, like, I can really bless that part of me, because that part of me kept me alive. That part of me my inner child helped me survive by being small or not speaking or trying hard to be good, right? And so I am grateful to her now for all of that hard work. But me staying there under that voice was really just hurting me and kept keeping me stuck in my suffering.
Your inner child, that inner critic, that way of surviving impossible, lack of support, neglect, whatever those particular stories are, was operating out of fear. It was operating out of need. It was operating out of necessity. And so when, again, this is the wisdom of our self, of this is why my passion and my work is to help people connect with themselves, because ourselves actually in safety, when it's safe enough, just know when something is a better solution for surviving than what we've had up to that point. You know, it's simple in the sense that love, and this is really what I want to get to here, is I want to say this about the reflection to you. The love that you found was really a mirror for you to see yourself as love for the first time. And your inner critic would just have to listen, because she's honest. She's trying, she's just a survivor. She's just trying. She's just honest, right? So there's going to be a diminishment, even if it's not fully convinced, whatever that part is, whether it's an inner critic or, something else. But that reflection of honest humanity, it's not even a blessing versus a curse. It's just a reflection of here's you as a person, a little girl, 8 or 9 years old. Let's think about what an 8 or 9-year-old little girl looks like. And let's look at her, right? So this is what, again, I just so appreciate your language, because it's really pulling up not only the granularity of the power of the granularity of the story, but the granularity of change and how and why change can happen, and the surprise that it brings. Oh my goodness. It doesn't make null anything that's happened, but the weight of the joy is so precious and profound that it heals. It really does.
Oh, and I could go into because the healing, and I could go into some brain talk here, and I will just briefly. I'm not a brain expert by any means, but I know enough to know that knowing a little helped me so much when I began to understand that I have all the memories that I experienced. So let's just say all of the traumas, all of the hurts, all of the good stuff too, but it's all stored in a part of my brain that everything that I experience today, as I run that experience, it goes through that part of my brain, up my brain stem, through that middle part of my brain where that stuff is stored before it gets to my prefrontal cortex. Everything that I experience. And so when we experience something, we have a neural pathway, a path that particular kind of experience, it might be the way it smells or the way it sounds or what we see, right? But it always will go along that same pathway, because that's the only pathway that my brain has.
Yeah.
Until I have a new experience. And that is what happens in story work, is we're bringing these old stories that have a pathway that always, and it might have been in truth or even in our imagination, that played a certain way. But now, when I shared that story with others and I received their responses of care and kindness and attunement and love, it gave my brain new data. So now that story wasn't only encapsulated in pain and separation and loneliness and survival. Now that very memory was also encapsulated by love and kindness and care and attunement. And so now my brain has options that it did not have before. And usually we have to run the new neural pathway a few times before it becomes the default. But once we run that new, kindness is available to me. Oh, this place where I thought I would be utterly unacceptable, I now have people who could hear that very thing and not turn away from me in disgust.
And like you better.
And like me better. True, right?
Yeah.
It's true.
Mm-hmm.
Because now and it helped me begin to become more authentic with people because I wanted that, and my brain and my body. And so when we understand a little bit about the brain and recognize that healing is when our brain can run a new neural pathway. But the only way that can happen is through experiences. I mean, yeah, we have to experience something different. We can learn something different and it stays here. When we experience something different, it goes through our body, through our brainstem, through that part of our brain before it ever gets to our prefrontal cortex. So the prefrontal cortex, that is the part of our brain that helps us make decisions or learn a new skill or schedule our lives. It's what we call our executive function. And so once I have this new experience, then that part of my brain can help me, for example, say, I think I want to stay in a story group. I'm going to sign up again. I think I want to, all the things, but it's that part of the brain that then helps me begin to do life differently because I now have other experiences that are reshaping and reframing.
For those of us who have been in the world of walking alongside people for a while now, I think that early language, like that started in the 80s, maybe 90s, was about all we knew was that information wasn't producing what we thought it would, but experiences were. And so now we're understanding, like we're able to retrofit language through the science that's coming out to understand why that's true. And so in this particular example of what we're talking about today it's the experience of an enlargement of shame within the experience of love and compassion. So that the shame can then ultimately be reduced and eventually it just doesn't have anything to hook onto in that kind of love. I'm so glad you went into the brain science because you and I, neither one are neuroscientists or whatever, doctors of brain. I can come up with the right words, but I'm not going to, just for the fun of it, because that's not who we are. We are women who have lived the truth of this, and that's where we're coming from. We've had to learn, it's not to say education is bad, information is bad. It's excellent. We need the information, but it is really largely to help us retrofit what's happening that we, in our senses, understand. Our inner critic starts softening, our heart starts opening. Can you just speak to something even a little bit more particular about what it takes to reclaim a sense of worthiness, when it's been, this distorted and challenged, really? And by that, I would say it's because you weren't given those deeply embedded needs of a human to be seen and safe and soothed and what's the fourth S?
Secure.
Yeah. So talk to us about that. How that reclaiming of a sense of worthness.
I think for me, so much of that pain a lot of it came from the mother wound. And I've shared stories about how as a child I was nurtured by Mother Earth more than my own mother, and that I would run to the woods and I would climb a tree and wrap my arms around the trunk and sway in the treetops, or I would just burrow into the earth underneath the pine branches and just And we know now how the earth actually gives us love. It actually fills our body with oxytocin, which causes us to feel love. And I literally was being nurtured by the earth. And I love that so much. And I love nature, and I am so grateful that nature was there, because even as a pretty young child, I was searching for a mother's love, and I would go to visit friends or cousins, and I would just kind of hang around the mom, and I just longed for her to put her hand on my shoulder or say something kind to me. And so I had just this really huge longing for a mother's love throughout my life. And I think that was one of the things then that came through sharing stories, and stories of harm in this area, where the words and the care that would come to me in even I remember one particular story where one of the people said to me, if I could pull the little girl in that story onto my lap right now and wrap my arms around her and hold her close, I would. And those words, again, in the context of that story, were so powerful for me. And it was there was such purity there, and such goodness, that my body and soul had literally longed for decades.
Oh.
I've joked about the children's book where the little bird goes around, the little bird that fell out of its nest, and it goes around, and it says to everyone and everything, "Are you my mother?" And I kind of did that through a lot of my life. I was looking and wanting so much, and then when I began to find it in a place that was very safe and where such goodness was offered. And throughout my life, honestly, I think there have been many people who did. They were there, and they made me worthy of enough goodness in this space of sharing my stories. And like you said, even making shame bigger when we share the particularities. It's not going in and saying, yeah, well, I experienced this time when we don't give the view from 30,000 feet. We actually share the things that were so hard and so shameful. And when the people that heard my story looked at me and spoke words of kindness and offered love, they made me worthy for the first time that I could connect with human to human. And I needed those experiences before I could actually offer that to myself. Now I can offer it to myself. I'm worthy of love.
Yeah.
I'm really worthy of love. And I will ask for it sometimes, like, here's what I need. Like, I can say that. But it took experiences, first with the earth, then with people in general, then in this very precious kind of space that for me was so powerful and effective, before my brain could understand that, wow, maybe it's true. And what if I can turn toward myself now with curiosity and compassion when I'm dysregulated or when I mess something up? Can I turn toward myself with the same kind of or a similar kind of care that I now experience coming from another human?
As we wrap up part 2, I keep thinking about something Cher said. Healing happens when we experience something different, not simply when we understand something different. There is a profound difference between knowing we are worthy and experiencing ourselves as worthy. And perhaps that's why healing can feel so slow at times. Our minds may understand long before our bodies and hearts are ready to trust. In our final conversation together, Cher and I move even deeper into themes of belonging, mothering, connection, creativity, and what it means to reclaim the parts of ourselves that were never fully welcomed. We'll explore the lifelong nature of healing and the surprising ways love continues to reshape us long after the deepest wounds have occurred. I hope you'll join us.